Hello, everybody, and welcome to our All About People sessions. We have with us today Kim Fuller. Thank you so much, Kim, for being here with us.
My pleasure.
We are going to have a wonderful conversation today. We're going to be discussing a lot of different topics, and I hope that you guys are going to enjoy the conversation we're going to have.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
I'm
again.
excited. Yeah.
Me too. So, thinking of your essence and your values, and your nature as a person, obviously, who is Kim Fuller?
Yeah, that's such a deep question, and I love it so much. I'm like, okay, right out of the gate. I think in my heart, I want to be seen as playful and very open, and I feel that way. And I think I love looking at the world with a huge eye of curiosity, like what's out there, who's out there, how can I engage with it in a positive way. I think I love people. I really am very curious about people. I want to hear their stories. I want to know how they got where they are. So I think being curious is probably like the key word, and then maybe open and just hopefully compassionate. Yeah, I think in my heart that's what I feel speaks to me the most. Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you.
It does sound like when you and it makes sense about your artistic part with the photography.
Yes.
Yes. And can you share a little bit about your journey?
Sure.
What led you to where we are here today?
Yeah. So I grew up with a Navy father and an artist mom. So I had like a really interesting influence. But my father was also quite creative. He was a writer before he went into the military. And we were always sailing, so we had always had some sort of small sailboat, and then we ended up living on a sailboat when I was a teenager. So I have two sisters, so it was 3 teenage girls on this fairly small boat with my parents, and I think we had 2 cats, maybe 1 cat. So it was an interesting life, but it was very contemplative. So we, time on the water is you're not doing anything except just taking things in and thinking and being like that. So I think that formed a lot of my way of being in the world, of just being very present. And so I ended up at Rhode Island School of Design after traveling around as a child, but really loved it and felt like I found my people because they were the same. They saw the world with eyes of curiosity, as artists do, and we just had incredible conversations, and they didn't think I was weird about the things I wanted to talk about. So I really appreciated that time. And so that's what led me into being a professional photographer. And that career has really enabled me to meet a lot of different people and see them without seeming weird and creepy, because I'm really looking at them carefully, because I do portrait work. That's mainly what I've been doing, or weddings, events, that kind of thing. So I'm having to look very carefully through the lens of my camera. So it's been a really interesting career to study people in a different way than being a psychologist or something like that. So I've really enjoyed that so much, and it opened up a lot of doors. I got to hear a lot of lectures I might not have heard when I had to go photograph them, or I've been at interesting events or in different people's homes, and so I got to see a lot of things being a photographer, which was really exciting. So I got to meet people and hear their stories, and also see them in their uncomfortableness or their self-expression or their authenticity or not. So it was just a real study in human behavior.
Wow,
yeah,
fascinating.
It's been an incredible career. I've really loved it. But as things go, your life changes, and I know we're going to have more conversation about what happened after my photography career, but just life took me in a different direction for a little while. Yeah, I still do photography, but I've also created Born to Rise, which is a little bit different, and it's kind of exciting. Yeah.
It sounds very exciting.
Yeah.
I love that you went to RISD.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a cool school.
Found your weirdos.
Yeah, I found my other weirdos. It really just opened my eye. Like, I remember one of my first classes, one of my instructors showing us something that was organic and inorganic. So sort of just like maybe a piece of plastic and then a shell, and he said, just notice the differences in the patterns and the textures, and one is very handmade and one is made by nature, and so just that little contrast was kind of interesting, because I'm like, oh, and then I started looking at everything, like, ooh, the patterns in the wood, and oh, there's the pebbles on the ground, and they're making a shape, and the texture, and the light, and so it just really opened me up to looking in a different way, and seeing more contemplatively versus objectively, like, oh, that's a rock. Well, it's also full of texture and beauty, and there's lines, and it's interacting with other rocks, and it, so it was an interesting expansion of the way I saw the world, which has applied to how I see people, honestly.
I was going to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's all connected.
Yeah.
It's all connected. So it was a really wonderful experience to be there.
I admire that about artists, because we might be looking at the same thing, but you are seeing something completely different than non-artistic people are.
Yeah, but that's kind of life, right? Like, I think we all see things from varying perspectives, and it's something I love talking about, because I don't think we realize how different everyone's perspectives are, based on so many factors. Like, who's been raising you? What influence have you had? What environments have you lived in? And how have you taken that in? Like, just because of who you are, like your very first question, your nature, right? Like, what is your nature, and how have you taken the information? And if you have siblings, like, you were all raised the same, but very different.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, my sisters and I all navigate the world very differently.
And you grew up in the same household, with the same rules, and under the same... Yeah.
I think our hearts are the same.
Of course.
But kind of the way we see the world is different. So it's fascinating to me. I just love it all. I really do. I love it all. And the other thing that was really interesting about RISD is that when you're creating art, it's all obviously very personal, right? You're pulling from yourself and your art and how you see the world. And then you put it on the wall, and you have what they call critiques. And so people are commenting on your very personal work. Yeah. But you get kind of used to it. So you almost develop like a thick skin, because everyone's talking about your work, and then you kind of have to take all that in and think about it, and you start to kind of make your own corrections if you want to, or you can stick with your guns and say, no, I'm doing it this way because this is what really matters, and I'm not going to listen to that person. So it was just such a great training ground for figuring out who I am.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it was amazing. It's amazing.
It sounds like it was amazing. I'm so glad you had the opportunity to go to that school.
Me too. Thank you.
Develop there.
Yeah. I didn't know there was such a thing as art school, and I was very excited when I found out.
So you mentioned that a minute ago, so I would love to start talking about that. What inspired you to create the movement, the Born to Rise movement?
Yeah.
And if you could share, what was one of the most rewarding parts of it?
Yeah, I mean, there's been so many, but I'll start from the beginning. I'd been doing my photography career for a long time, and I had a very pivotal experience, which I'll go into more, but it really changed my life in an interesting way. And I started studying mindfulness and Buddhism, and then 2 years later adopted a child, which I'll go into more later too. But there was a lot that was sort of happening, and then I ended up writing a book and doing a TED Talk, which is something I never thought I would do. And that experience, after going through some challenges with the adoption, with other things, the family and things like that, and then speaking about it and being invited to speak on a big stage about something so personal, was scary, but also really healing. And it got me to really think about vulnerability and the enoughness that particularly women, I think, feel like we never feel like we're enough. There's always something that's making it, and that's a lot of conditioning we know in the world, right? So we won't talk about that right now. But anyway, but when I was standing on that stage, after ripping my hair out for 3 months trying to make sure I was enough to stand on a TED stage and deliver a talk, it was really a powerful healing experience to share my story and actually get sort of this standing ovation at the end. And I say sort of because my son, who I speak about in my story, comes out on the stage. Mm-hmm. And in a way, he's sharing his story in his own version just by showing up and standing there. And of course, everyone cheered for him because they had heard about his journey and my journey together. So me speaking my story out loud and him just kind of standing in it, and then the two of us standing there with this crowd, sort of acknowledging what we'd gone through, was a really powerful and healing experience for both of us. And I don't know, a couple months after that, I had done a manifestation workshop, and I just was kind of playing with my journey. I'm like, what am I really feeling? And I knew something was coming, you know? Sat in meditation one day, and it just all kind of came in, like, you need to create this for more people, particularly women, because women's voices are not heard enough. We call his story history for a reason. It's his story. Mainly, history has been written by men, particularly white men, and we need her story. We need that balance. Men's stories are important, but also women's stories are important, because we know, like we said before, we perceive the world in it from a different perspective. Men often talk about power, wars, battles, overcoming, challenges, all these big things. Women tend to talk more from a side of compassion and gathering and community and supporting and raising children and, things like that are very important in the world. We're just not seen as much. And so I really felt like if we could start to amplify women's voices, that we could balance the scales a little bit. And what's been so beautiful is that men are also listening to our stories. I hold monthly events, and we have storytelling events. And more men are starting to come. And it's funny because my husband didn't think he would be interested at first, but he always has supported me. But then I think my sister was invited. She came to speak and share a story one time. And so he came to support her, and he's been coming ever since, because he saw the power in it. And because he does support women, he was like, this is amazing. And I think he's learning. I think he's, hearing things that have not been in his ear as much. So it's been beautiful. So that experience on that stage and feeling that power of the healing was really what I think brought it all home for me. And I've really started to trust my intuition more. So it's kind of funny because I didn't know what I was going to call it. I just knew what it was going to be. And I was literally I said to myself, okay, universe, send me the name. Like, what would be a great name? And I was at the movies. I was at a movie theater. Mm-hmm. And one of those car commercials came on. And the phrase "born to rise," something, I don't even know why. And I thought, that's it! There it is, that's it! And so it's just one of those things, like, the more open you stay, the more you start to hear what you need to hear. And because of the mindfulness work, we learn to clear out the clutter that's usually there, like the I'm not enough, or the worries, or the fretting, or the memories and the arguments we just had, and blah, blah, blah. When we can sort of clear that out, we make room for the things that really want to come in. So Born to Rise came from, that's how it came to. But also, I think what the best layer for me is that I've also realized it's not just white women, it's all women, particularly women of color or underserved populations that are not being heard. And the more I invite as diverse of a population as possible, I'm seeing shifts. Because I've seen it from myself. I've obviously been raised in a white world. I was skewed that way, my thoughts were that way, my conditioning was that way. But I also had the privilege of moving around a lot and seeing a lot of different kinds of people. But there's still more. There's always more. And so hearing these stories from different populations and starting to meet people as I invite them in to share and all that is really expanding my awareness a lot more about the different struggles that people have that I'm just not aware of. And not because I don't want to be necessarily, but I don't always know the best approach, or I don't mix with different communities as much as I could. And so I'm starting to do that a lot more, and I'm really finding it to be an amazing experience.
It is an amazing experience. My father used to tell me all the time that your universe is as big as the people you surround yourself with.
Good father.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, good advice.
He gave me great advice, but that is one of the ones that resonated with me the most. Like, who do I want around me, and is this the world?
Right.
Yeah.
Our world can be really small, or it can be super broad.
I'm going for super bra.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
So going back to, you've mentioned your work with mindfulness and Buddhism, and your work blends, right, between photography and doing that. How did you develop this? How did it come to be?
Yeah, so I was on a photography assignment. Salve Regina University in Newport was hosting the Dalai Lama for a talk. And I was super excited because I didn't have a lot of religious background. I felt very spiritual just being out in nature and in the water. That was sort of my church. And but I was going through something. I was kind of struggling, and I didn't feel like I had something to turn to, like a faith per se. And so I'm on this assignment. I show up at this massive tent that was outside Salve's back lawn, and there were already, people streaming in, and they had to arrive very early for security and going through the whole ordeal. And I'd been shooting for Salve for many, many years, and when I get to the university, I realize I'm not the key photographer. So my ego's all already blown up, right? Well, why am I not sitting with the Dalai Lama while he's having lunch with the president of the university? And why am I not going to get to move around and take his photo? I was told to sit in one seat the whole time. And I thought I was going to get to walk around. So he comes in the back of the tent, and I felt the whole energy of the room shift. And here I am sitting in my seat wanting to jump up and take all these photographs, and I couldn't. And so I was getting, my ego, I'm frustrated, I'm anxious, and all the expectations were there of, it's going to go this way, and I'm going to get these photos. And of course, none of that was happening. And so there was my own story in that moment. But he comes down the aisle, and just to keep it simple, I got to shake his hand. And I did not expect that. And it was the most moving experience I've ever felt in my life. It's very hard to explain, but if you meet someone who is, I suppose, that compassionate, then you feel like you're held in this love bubble, is the only way I can really express it. But for those few moments that we shook hands and locked eyes, I just was so moved. And I was like, what just happened? What is he doing to be able to have this kind of experience with strangers? And I could see all the other faces in the crowd, light up as he shook their hands as well. Why I took it a step further, I have no idea, but I heard his words. It just simply resonated with me. And I thought, this is something that makes sense to me. And I think what it was is that he said our minds often direct us all day long, and we're not even aware of what it's telling us. We just kind of go with the conditioning. It's almost like our mind's like a superhighway, and it's wired, right? And so when we turn on the computer in the morning and we wake up, it's already programmed to go in certain directions.
Yeah.
But when we can start to be aware of it and figure out which parts work and which parts don't, we actually have control of how to reprogram the way that we think and see and believe and all of that. And when we do that, it opens us more. And it does that, what I talked about earlier, is it helps us clear away the baggage that no longer is serving us. We can remember it, but we don't have to listen to it in the same way. And we can say, does that really work for me? Or is that someone else's words that I'm just holding on to? Is that a belief that I've been told that really doesn't work for me? Yeah. And so you start to really awaken to who you are and what you believe and what you feel about the world. So it just felt right to me. So I went home and started meditating, tried to find some teachers, and a lot of monks hanging around. So it was, but I met a few gentlemen who were into Buddhism. We started a little Buddhist group in Newport and brought a teacher to who was in Middletown, Connecticut,
Wow.
who was a peer of the Dalai Lama, actually, very high scholar monk, and so he was a very good teacher. So I learned a lot from him, but then I felt like I want, I don't know enough. It's not every day. I'm craving more. And my friend said, teachers are everywhere, so keep your eyes open. And then, of course, about a year later, I met my now son, who was at the group home that I was volunteering at. And so we spent a year volunteering at this group home, and I loved Kaidel, is his name, and he was so little and just very cute, and I could tell he was super smart. He was very athletic and just needed to get out of there. He needed a family. And so I didn't think I would be that family. I just hoped that someone would scoop him up, or he would end up back with his birth family, or whatever the situation would be. But the woman who ran the group home asked me if I would adopt him, and of course my heart was going, because I did love him already. And so I thought, oh my gosh, because I had 2 teenage children at the time. And I thought, okay, well, I'll go home and take this information to my husband. And he was ready. He was like, let me meet him. His mother had been adopted, but she didn't find out until she was about 60 years old. Wow. However, she also had fostered many babies in his home when he was young. So he was kind of familiar with the process. So he was more open to it. And it was one of those things, kind of like the TED Talk, that scared me to death, but was also exciting. And I've learned that when those 2 things are happening at the same time, it's a yes for me. Wow. When I'm really scared and also really excited. So I'm like, yes, all in. So long story short, we did end up adopting him, and it was the most challenging thing my whole family have ever gone through. I was not familiar with the kinds of trauma that existed in the world. I'm very blessed. My parents were stable people, no drugs or alcohol. We weren't beaten. We were always a unit. I had my sisters. I'm very blessed in as far as family life goes. And he did not have the same situation. There's a lot of moving around, a lot of trauma. His mother, wonderful woman, we're still in touch with his birth family, but she had some things going on, and she just couldn't keep him. But she was visiting all the time, so I'd seen her coming, and I was very confused, like, what's going on? But anyway, his traumas got the better of him, and there was a lot of upsets in my family that were very challenging. However, he was my greatest spiritual teacher.
Wow. I
had to learn and put into action all of the things I was learning. Like, what does it really mean to be compassionate? What does it mean to love someone even when they're challenging or violent or driving you crazy? What does that look like? Because in my heart, there was no way he was going back into the system. And God bless my children. They went through a lot, but they have been amazing as well. And my husband was great. I mean, it was hard for all of us, and all of us had very challenging days. But now Kydell is 23, and he was just home for the weekends. He's finished college. He's still as smart as he was when he was 7 years old, and I feel really grateful that we've been able to give him what he deserved. Everybody deserves it. Yeah. You know, I mean, and I think what was so powerful about it all was that my eyes were open to something I didn't know before. And I learned what he had to navigate that was very different from myself. Regardless of being a young man with brown skin, also coming from a lot of turmoil in his life, right? Yeah. And so there was just so much that I learned from him, and hopefully took away and helped everything else that I'm doing. But it was the thing that inspired me to write the book and do the TED Talk. So all of that adoption piece, meeting the Dalai Lama, adopting the child, and then it all started to propel everything else that has come since. It was just a big shift in my life. It was the biggest, just that moment of feeling pure love from the Dalai Lama, a stranger. I thought, this is possible in the world. He's a human being. Yeah. We can develop this within ourselves. And so it's been my inspiration to teach it in many ways, because I'm not necessarily a Dharma teacher or a, you know, I've led meditation. I talk about what I've learned, but I always say, if you really want to learn about Buddhism or more about this, please get an experienced teacher, because it's a deep teaching. Yeah. So anyway, but it's kind of what led me to then combining the photography and the mindfulness, because I think it's approachable for people. It's a way to say, how are you seeing the world? And let's practice through the lens of a camera, right? Wow. So instead of looking, like we talked about earlier, at objects, can we look more contemplatively at things? Like, look at the layers that make something up. Look at the human layers. Look at the, you know, the political scene and the layers behind all of that, because we tend to just jump right into what we see right away.
And that's it, yeah. Yeah.
A lot of talking, but it's a rich story for me, because it did really change my life.
It's amazing to hear you talking about it. I can see the spark in your
Yes,
eyes. You
it
hit
does light
certain
up.
points. I
Thank
love
you.
that. My mom is a Buddhist. I was raised Catholic,
Okay.
but I am a very spiritual person, but I don't currently practice any religion.
Yeah,
And I remember when my mom discovered Buddhism,
yeah,
she felt that. She felt the awakening and she felt the safe place that she wanted to be. And she's been practicing it ever since for the past 40 years, I guess.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I mean, I've been meditating for about 17 years, and it's not easy to do because, and I hear a lot of people say this when I talk about it. They're like, I can't, as soon as I start sitting quietly, everything comes up and I just want to cry.
yeah.
And I say, I was there, but it's not there anymore in the same way. It doesn't. I still have the memories and the thoughts and the feelings, but they don't take over. And so meditation helps you learn to navigate all of the things that arise and be aware that they're there, but not have them take over your whole being. And so anger, for example, we all know we can get angry, but I tend to recognize it sooner and realize that's not helping me in any way, shape, or form. It's actually letting someone else, because usually we get angry at someone else or an experience, they're winning in that case, in a sense, or they're controlling me in a sense. I'm allowing it to control me.
Yeah.
And so when I learned that I could work with that and have it affect me less, then it's really opened me up, and I feel like I'm a little closer to that love place. And I'm not the Dalai Lama by any means, but I'm more compassionate for myself, and I love myself more, which, let's face it, that's the only person we can really control is ourselves.
Absolutely.
But if he could do that, which is what he does, is basically work on himself all day long, look at the impact he was having on the world underneath the tent. If you call that my world that day was under that tent. I thought, this is powerful.
Wow.
Powerful. And if I can just touch a couple of lives and have them feel this, it's one little baby step towards bettering the world, right? So
Absolutely.
It's something that drives me. It just drives me throughout the day because I've seen the change in myself, and hopefully it will help other people as well.
That's the impact that you could have. Again, and just like you said, even if you change one life, even if you impact 2 people in your life, it's going to be worth it, because those people are also going to impact other people, and it's a ripple effect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You got
it's
it.
beautiful.
On the same page.
And so coming to that, can you think, so let's talk about your story exchange experiences.
Yes, yeah.
Tell me, what challenges, have you faced any challenges in promoting it, in getting people to participate? And if you did, how did you overcome that?
Yeah, so basically I have a monthly gathering, and I invite 3 women to share a story. The biggest challenge is finding a space sometimes, because I'm not making a lot of money doing these, but I make some. But a lot of rental spaces are, several $100s, and that's probably all I'm really making. So what I've found was that I was able to partner with a local restaurant that had a room, and a couple of other venues who are willing to host, because I bring in a lot of people to either eat or drink. So I often do it on like a Tuesday where it might not be as busy, and so we try to do a win-win situation where I've been working with Diego's in Middletown. They have a beautiful room upstairs, but they've been incredible hosts. Yeah, and then Stoneacre, and then there's a couple other venues who have been really, really awesome at hosting. And so we gather, but that's been the biggest challenge, of just finding a space that feels quiet enough, for one, and also where we can gather enough people. Because I've had anywhere from 35 people to 80 people at an event, so it's just hard to know how many are going to come, every month. But I think between that and just marketing is always, marketing is marketing. But thank goodness for social media, that helps. But what's been interesting is that the women who share will also share on their platforms. And so they bring in their own people who want to come hear them share, of course. Yeah. And so the list builds very organically. So it's been, fortunately, the marketing has been really more about supporting my audience and putting out positive messaging and all that kind of thing. which I think is a little softer sell, if you will.
Yeah.
And then because I really want to create a community that feels very supportive, and especially after COVID, and people are feeling like, where do I really want to spend my time? So I want to bring value. So I'm able to just kind of market that way, and then it just has been slowly building. I've been doing it for about 5 years, and then I have an annual festival. So that's just kind of I call it my story nights on steroids. We just kind of pump it up a little bit more. We have more. We have sometimes we've had it outdoors, and we've got music and dance and other things that I think are self-expressive ways of sharing our story. So we just kind of pump that up a little bit. It's been really fun.
Yeah, it sounds really fun.
Yeah.
Can't wait to attend one.
Yeah. But otherwise, some of the challenges are finding diversity, because I'm in a very white, neighborhood, so to speak. But I do my best to reach out and invite people from all over, and I'm trying to expand and come into Providence more, or come in. We did an event at Rhode Island College, and we had 3 Latino speakers, and it was really great. Because I'm mainly hearing a certain kind of story, and now I was hearing, a different kind of story. And 2 of them were immigrants, so it was really interesting to hear their story as well. And one gentleman talked about literally walking through Guatemala and Mexico and all that, and here's this really smart, educated young man. That's not what they're showing you on the news.
No.
And so it just was very, again, affirming for the fact that we need to hear people's individual stories. We can't just bulk people into a group and assume that they're all the same.
I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah, it's just been, no.
Yeah.
No.
And going back to that, like listening to other people's stories and seeing them where they are right now, and we assume a lot.
Yes.
And we were like, oh, well, they had it made. Or, well, it wasn't that hard, or, they're all, thugs, or they're all, like, just lumping
not
everybody.
smart, they're lazy, they're, you name
all
it.
the things.
Anything.
And we are all individuals with different lives and interesting lives and charming in our own way. So that's why, one of the reasons why we started doing the All About People sessions.
I love it. I absolutely love your brand. I think it's perfect. We're so in line and tune with each other on that, because you're going to be sharing these stories even more broadly.
That's the idea. The idea is to reach the most amount of people and to share, so you can see what's going on in other people's lives that you might not be able to hear every day, because also we live in the rush of our lives.
Yeah.
And like you said, our mind wakes up and then we're like on our highway.
I know. Well, my first book that I wrote about my son, it's called Finding, because I was about sort of finding yourself, finding your story, finding everything. But I write, my first paragraph is, this is my story. And if you asked anyone else in my family, they would tell a completely different story. Because I truly believe that. We all were experiencing the same kind of thing, but in our own perspectives. They were teenagers, I'm an adult. My husband came from knowing about adoption, but his disposition is different than mine, or whatever. So it was just something I felt was very important to say, because it's something that people need to realize.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
Yeah. So,
and would you like to share with us an example of one story of transformation that you've seen that you think is something that stayed with you in some way?
Yeah. So I've heard so many beautiful stories at my events, but I'm just going to salute my son again, because he came in with a certain story of not being lovable, not being smart, I'm never going to have this, that, or the other thing. And he's done the work. And we've done it together, obviously, as his mom. We've done it together, but he continues to put in the work to resolve his issues, because they don't go away. It's, he had his life before he came to us. He had his life during group home situation, then he had his life with us, and now he's got 2 families, because he does see his birth family, because he has 2 other siblings who are here and one who lives in another country. But so he's, and now he's in a partnership, he's in a relationship with this beautiful girl, and so he's continuing to do the work. And I think that's what is so important, because I know the more I continue to do the work, the happier I am, the more at ease I am, and the more transformative things are.
Yeah.
He's doing that, and I see him, just last night taking him back to the train station after coming from Boston for the weekend. He told me a story about some idea or how he'd shifted his thoughts, and I said, that's progress. Keep going. So every day we can work on ourselves. So that's really been the most transformative story.
Yes.
In long form, but I hear some incredibly transformative stories from women each time we share. Yeah, each time we have an event.
I bet it changes you too.
It does, every time. I'm just always more in awe of the resiliency of human beings.
Isn't
we
it
are
incredible?
quite resilient, especially when we're in community.
It takes a village.
It does.
I always say that. And as immigrants, you leave a lot behind.
Yeah.
And that family is a big one that you leave behind.
Yeah.
So you learn to make family where you go.
Yes.
And sometimes, sometimes it's just friends, sometimes it's your neighbors, sometimes the people that you work with. It depends on where your world is.
Yes.
But you need a village. No man is an island.
Well, it's a great attitude to have too, is to look at what you do have and not always what I don't have, because that can really keep you down.
Absolutely.
Because life throws those curveballs constantly. And,
all the time.
We want to be happy. We want to be held and feel loved, have opportunities and purpose, right? Like feel like we can have a purpose somewhere and matter. Yeah. Just matter in the world. So
it does.
Yeah, so I love what you're doing.
Yeah, I think I know what you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. We'll have you come in and share a story, I'm sure.
Oh, that would be an honor. I'm there.
Yeah.
100%.
Great.
I bring people.
Good.
So, bringing it back to that.
Yeah.
I love how we're flowing in this conversation. It feels so good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In our company at Imperiall, we aim to provide not only like professional but also interpersonal support, which is what my role in here is. What strategies do you use that you can share with me to make people feel seen, make people feel valued? And how can I apply that in our workplace? Being a cleaning company and trying to make people feel seen, feel valued.
Yeah. I think paying attention to them, like you're saying, and giving them a voice. And it doesn't always mean that, they're sitting at the main table, but they need to be heard because I do these story exchanges, which are really powerful experiences where, and sometimes I do them in corporate or organizations that are fairly large. And we bring people together and they pair up and share a story with one another. And I give like 3 topics. And so each person shares the story they want to share based on the topic or the prompt. And then the people come back to the larger group. And if I was your partner, I would say, hi, my name is Irene and this is my story. Or something like that, right?
Oh.
And so I'm going to share a story that my partner shared with me in first person. But what's so interesting is that it gives the safety of sharing a vulnerable story. And then you sit back and you listen to your story being told to a larger group. And so you're hearing what they heard too.
Yeah.
And so it's a practice in deep listening and compassion. But I'm always impressed with how vulnerable people are, but they also get an opportunity to be seen and heard. And it's often a story that they may not have told before, or they kept to themselves because they were worried that someone was going to judge them or think differently of them, because we all put on our best face when we come to work, but there's also so much more going on, as you know. And I think for me, the power in giving people voice, the way I've done it is I've created a stage for it. It is scary. Often women will say, 1, I don't have a story, or 2, I'm probably going to cry, or 3, I'm going to be shaky and whatever. And I said, it's all okay. And so just giving them permission to show up exactly as they are, I think in some ways helps them understand that if I'm like that and I've created this group of people, maybe they're like that it won't be so bad. And then after the fact, at every story night, I have these little cards and I have the audience write a note to the speakers about something that impacted them. And they just give them to them because there's no Q&A.
Yeah.
So it's a way to just be be seen and heard without any input, any commentary. You just get to be in your own space and be held in that. So I learned a lot from the Dalai Lama just in that 10-second moment of just hold space for people to be seen and heard. Whether you do it with exercises in your organization or you meet every morning and say, does anyone want to have anything they want to get off their chest? But I think if you're the leader in that kind of organization that's going to be willing to do that, you have to show up that way. So that's why I keep doing my work. Because if I'm not open and aware, there's no way I'm going to invite other people to show up that way. Yeah. So it's always about yourself. You've got to do the work and be ready to hear, because sometimes the stuff you're going to hear is not complimentary. Yeah. I've certainly had people say, well, why are you doing it that way? Or, gosh, I wish the room was more diverse. Or, why are you charging $20 to come to this thing? Or what, all the things that make me go, oh, God, what am I doing? Am I doing something wrong? Because right away it's like, we're wrong. Yeah. We're not enough, and then I reset. Let me take a look at that. And I have made adjustments on many of the things that people have commented on, and some I've stuck to my guns around. So I now offer a couple of free tickets because I do want it to be accessible to a lot of people. Yeah. So I have a paid version and a free version. So it's just little things every day, and being able to listen, take it in and take it to heart, but be ready, because some of it's your own work.
Yeah. Going back to making people feel seen and feeling heard, and like you said, I can imagine how intensely emotional that experience of meeting with the Dalai Lama. And I don't mean to, I know it's not the same, yeah. But I remember I was at an event at a gala in New York City, and the guest speaker was Annie Leibovitz.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember that everybody was just like with their phones out and taking pictures, and I was just happy to be in the same room with her.
Yeah.
That we made eye contact, and she reached into the group of people and like shook my hand, and I was like,
yeah,
like we had a moment.
Well, you were being present, right? Because how often are we just walking around with our phones? And I'm actually creating a whole course right now on mindful photography, because it's such a thing. We're almost mindless in our photography even. Yeah. And so you were present. And she connected with that.
She connected with that.
It's powerful when you are present for people. It's powerful.
Again, like I know it's not the same experience because illuminated being.
It's okay.
But Annie Leibovitz, for me, it was just an icon. Yeah. So when I thought of that, I was like, I want to live this moment instead of having it replayed to me on a phone.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to do that more consciously, trying to be present, be in the moment. It's hard sometimes.
Well, as an interviewer too, you're having to listen very carefully at what someone's saying so that you can respond and all the things. Yeah. Yeah. So it's gonna come naturally whether you practice it or not. You're practicing it right now here.
Yeah. So when you went through the experience of adopting your son, coming from a different culture, coming from a different upbringing, from a different situation. When in this company we work with people that are coming from many different situations, mm-hmm. many different backgrounds and different upbringing. Mm-hmm. What kind of strategies would you share with me that we can use in order to make everybody respecting their backgrounds,
yes.
but also feeling as a unit?
Yes. It's a challenge, because people are all coming in with their own conditioning, right? So I guess, I have never worked in a corporation on a regular basis, but any organization where you're mixing a lot of different cultures, let's say, I think it's just about taking the time as the leader of that company, if whoever is the leader, to make sure that they are able to get to know one another on a neutral ground. You've got to create this safe space. And if it's not safe, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so whether it's a story exchange, where they're getting time to talk, or they are just allowed to mingle in a casual environment, or one person gets up and talks about how they share their holiday, and another person gets up from another culture and talks about their holiday. Mm-hmm. And so you just start to see that we're all really just wanting to be with our families in a loving way, perhaps. I'm making an assumption about that too right now, but that we have this desire to be seen, heard, loved, cared for, and respected. And, it's a slow drip. But I also feel like the more they're working together, they may see each other. But there's also the opposite can happen. It's just conversation. It's getting to know someone on a different level. I remember there was an old story going around for a long time about a man who had been raised as a white supremacist. And he went to college and befriended a man of color. And they became like best friends. And the white guy ended up going, what was I ever thinking before? What was that was told to me? All this, that black people were this, that, and the other thing. And he really had his mind open because he was able to live with someone, be in a safe space or a unified space like a university or a place where they're all doing the same things. And it changed his life.
Wow.
Yeah. So
those stories give me hope.
Oh, I know, me too. But it's a slow drip. We have a lot of work to do.
It's like little work, like
yes.
Grains of sand.
But I will say, I think women are going to lead the way in this. I really do think women are going to lead the way, or I should say the feminine energy. I think a lot of men are extremely capable and willing to do this work as well. But there's a feminine energy of compassion and empathy and all of that has to come under whatever the gender is who's doing it. But it's a feminine energy.
Yeah, it's like that nurturing part.
The supportive part, the compassion. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
And how has the lesson learned from the interactions with your son transformed your professional views or your personal lives?
Yeah. Well, going back to this whole sort of overarching theme here of learning about each other and being open, is that he just came into my life with so many different things that I'd never had to experience. So when I say he's my greatest spiritual teacher, he, it's easy to be nice and happy and kind when everything's going well. Yeah. But how do you show up when challenges are in front of you? And so that's where I think he really showed me what it really means to be, as the Dalai Lama, showed, is that you have to love all people. And that doesn't mean you become a doormat and people walk all over you who are violent or evil or whatever you want to call it. But I had to learn how to love myself enough and say I was enough as his mother, and whatever came out of this, as long as I felt I was doing my best, that he would get what he needed. And he was on his own journey. So it wasn't about controlling, fixing, changing. It was about supporting. So I think he taught me that I just keep doing my own work. It's not about me changing or fixing anyone. No. I'm not here to fix anybody. I can't. There's nothing I can do. But I can listen and be present for you and hear you and see you. I'm not always going to get it right. As we know, children always let us know when we're doing something wrong.
Yep. Ain't that the truth?
So I'm awakened every day by that. But I feel that it's very important to just take from him that he's doing his work and I'm doing my work. Yeah.
And nurturing is so important. Like, people need to feel that they have somebody.
Yes, and we've talked about that a lot. Because I used to say to him, I was like, what do you think the one thing is that's really helped you the most? Because I believe that if we all have one person that is really on our side and, wants to help us, that we can get through a lot of things. And he says, yeah, I agree. Because when he was in the group home, there were many, but they came and went, and they were not like dedicated in the same way. They were great people, but there's something about that one person. So if I could be that for him, fantastic. If my son or my daughter was that person, or my husband, it doesn't matter. It's just that there's someone that he feels he can lean into. And now I feel like he's got this beautiful, supportive girlfriend. And I'm so grateful for her too, because she knows this whole story. And she's been amazing. And so now he can move on in that next phase of his life. And even if it doesn't last forever and ever, it's what he needs right now, and it's perfect. So yeah, I think that one person thing is so true.
It is true. And it comes from that feminine energy that you were talking about earlier.
And never doubt the power you have to help someone. I don't care how small it feels. If you meet an immigrant and you know you're as privileged, like I feel like I'm a very privileged person overall. How can you do one thing, even if it's just listening to their story or directing them towards someone who can help them get what they need? There's a lot of power in that. And so never doubt that in yourself. You always have something you can give.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
This has been beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to go to see one of the next stories, and I want to hear more from everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
Interesting and fascinating.
Yeah, born to rise. You were born to rise.
Rising. And thank you everybody for tuning in today. This was all about people sessions at Imperial. My name is Irene, and I wish you all a good afternoon.